Hey folks, Zach Osterman here. I'm Insider, Indianapolis Star, Tyler Tachman, Indianapolis Star, Kansas 84, Indiana 62. As comprehensively as Indiana's been beaten, certainly this season, probably in a while, I think, you even maybe give them some credit for the way they fought back in Vegas, for times they pushed back at Rutgers. This was ugly, and there were the intangibles. Indiana just didn't look focused or connected or ready to play. That's not new, it's a problem. There were the tangibles. I thought they really struggled with Kansas's length. We thought Trace Jackson-Davis might have some size advantages in this game, but basically everybody else really struggled with just the length and the wingspan Kansas could put in passing lanes. The offense never got into a consistent rhythm. They got Jalen Hood-Schifino back and immediately lost Xavier Johnson. There was really nothing good about today for Indiana.
I think it wasn't most concerning to me that Indiana lost, because I think that there were scenarios that you could say coming out of this game that if Indiana plays a close game and they still lose, there's a lot of positives you can take out of it. What I think is most concerning is the way in which they lost. It was pretty clear Indiana doesn't deserve to be in the same conversation as Kansas. Kansas is far and away better. I think that this kind of validates what we saw a fair amount in the Arizona game, that if Indiana wants to be a Big Ten contender, the gap is wider than I think a lot of people expected at this point. It wasn't like this was a back and forth game and, Indiana played well. And I think you can look at now the Arizona game in a better context, that wasn't just a really bad stretch of play, that it was an outlier, that now that has become something against top tier competition that has become more of a trend. So I just think the way that it happened, Indiana offensively, they just looked like they had no idea what they were doing. There was not much flow. They turned the ball over a ton. It looked like they totally lost their identity, and really everything that or most at least of what you would want this team to be at this point in the season, they weren't.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it. And, this video would be 30 minutes long if we broke everything down. We'll podcast about it soon. This team has regressed in areas from a year ago that it could not afford to regress in without progressing substantially in areas it hasn't progressed in. Thinking about defense, in games like this, too many offensive rebounds, and really just kind of the combination of too many offensive rebounds and too many turnovers. Sometimes it's a little bit more of one. Today it was more turnovers. Sometimes it's a little bit more of the other, like it was offensive rebounds against Rutgers and Arizona. But it's the idea that Indiana can't give these free possessions away because they're not good enough to score. As Mike Woodson said, they're not good enough to score 90 in a game like this. And there's just been, it often when you have those kinds of problems, when you have problems with offensive rebounds, when you have problems with live ball turnovers, when you're not, locked in and playing defense at a level that I think it was fair to expect of Indiana this season, that's just a reflection of a team that's not really good right now. A team that has a level somewhere that it's not reaching. And listen, I took some criticism. I stand by what I said about Arizona and Indiana last week. But the flip side of that is Indiana's not guaranteed to reach that level. They've got to take the steps. They've got to make the strides. They've got to put together the just sort of the connected, cohesive performances that get them there. And Mike Woodson said from his first day on the job, he wanted games like this when he thought his team was ready. We thought his team was ready, at least not necessarily to win this game, but compete in this game, compete in the Arizona game, etc. They don't look ready. And they don't look ready in some tangible ways in terms of, again, Kansas kind of overwhelmed them a little bit physically in some areas. They don't look ready in some intangible ways. Mike Woodson said it was a really good week of practice. He said he was most disappointed maybe in himself in the sense that he thought his team was ready, and it turned out they weren't. And, like any coach would, he kind of took that on himself. You can be accountable, and that's commendable. But without improvement, it really doesn't make a difference. And I think, the question Indiana's going to have to answer here, they have they got Elon on Tuesday, they got Kennesaw State on Friday, both games they should win comfortably. As long as they do, they've got a prolonged stretch here where they've got a couple good performances, to be fair. Xavier, UNC, I guess to some extent Nebraska. They've got some bad ones. They got some time to do some soul searching here. To me, they look a little tired. And I think that, Mike Woodson talks a lot about the rigorousness of their practices. I'm not suggesting you take away all the intensity of practice, but at times they look like they disengage easily because they get fatigued a little too fast. It might be time to rest some legs. It might be time to have some tough conversations, maybe shuffle the rotations. I don't know. But it does feel like these next 2.5 weeks, they obviously need to go 2-0 next week. But then it does feel like there needs to just be some of the sort of mid-season soul searching from the team that has given you some reason to believe they can be roughly what we thought they were in the preseason. But they've also given you now ample evidence to believe that the ceiling may be lower than what we expected it to be.
There's also the fact that Indiana has taken the shovel and dug themselves a huge hole in each of the last 2 games, and they're basically against Arizona and Kansas now. They've basically started down double digits, and Indiana at this point isn't good enough to dig themselves out of that. Especially in a place like this where it was really loud. The atmosphere was, it was a really good atmosphere that you can't afford to do that. And Indiana's offense did not do what it needed to today. I think Indiana's offense has improved since last season. I don't know if it has enough firepower to dig itself.
It hasn't improved enough. It hasn't improved enough to compensate.
No.
That's what I wrote after Arizona. It hasn't improved enough to compensate for how much they've regressed defensively,
Yeah.
and that's a real issue.
Yeah, and I think you also look at moving forward, the question with the point guards is that, point guard is a position that Indiana having a steady presence there that they've really lacked in going back to the last few seasons. And you saw the difference it made toward the end of last season when Xavier Johnson was clicking and the offense was rolling, and they make the run in the Big Ten tournament, and things just started to feel like they fell into place a lot more offensively. And this season, there was a few games that Jalen Hood-Schifino and Xavier Johnson played together. Then Jalen Hood-Schifino is out with the injury, and now this was the first game that they were both back together, and Xavier Johnson gets hurt. So I feel like, being able to have that steady presence, is going to be a question mark moving forward. And I think that the contrast between DeJuan Harris, I thought he was really good. He was, for Kansas, he was enjoyable to watch, of just making the right plays, making good plays. And I think there was a justifiable contrast between the fact that Indiana needs that type of point guard play, and that right now I don't think they have it.
Again, we can go on. This has been about 7.5 minutes, so we're going to close it down for here. But we will, some combination of me, Wilson, Moore, who's writing at the end of the row, and Tyler will have you covered for the next 2 games. Then there will be kind of a layoff for all of us before Iowa on January 5th. We'll talk to you after. Elon will talk to you after Kennesaw State. There we go. The Pam Whitten Derby. But for the most part, have happy holidays. And stick with us in the new year, because this season is going to roll on. And listen, everything is contextualized by what happens next. I've seen Indiana teams get blown away at Duke and win the Big Ten. I've seen Indiana teams beat Kansas and lose in the first round of the NIT. So, I can't tell you what's going to happen in the next 3 months, but we'll be there for it. For Tyler Tachman, for the Bloomington Herald-Times, the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.